Hi everyone. I thought I'd run through this video because a lot of people talk to me about, why they get back pain, especially in things like squatting and lunging and then other activities. So we're just going to focus on squatting and maybe get into a bit of lunging as we go. It's almost like, if you're watching this at home, it's a really good little diagnostic tool to see what happens to you when you go through that motion. So a lot of people get lower back pain when they squat, for instance, and it's one of the things that we look at from a technical point of view. Is one of the first things we look at if you come to us and we want to get you to move. Like a squat tells you a lot about someone's ability to move. So there's two basic things that happen when we move. We provide joint mobility. So mobility is the range of motion you can act around a joint. So flexibility is the length of a muscle. So is my muscle long enough to do this activity? And for most people, that's going to be yes. Joint mobility is affected by a few different things. It's affected by muscle tension, especially when you don't have enough stability around the joint. So stability around a joint is created by muscle tension. And there needs to be an appropriate or a big enough amount of tension to give a joint a stability context around, and then there needs to be enough ability for the muscles to let go or relax or to lengthen to enable that joint to go through a certain range of motion as well. So if you look at a thing like a knee joint is a hinge joint. So if you bend a hinge on a door, then eventually that hinge will bend and potentially the door will get pulled off the hinges. And a knee is not exactly like that, but it's quite similar. You've got two bony areas like this, doing this, and you've got a whole bunch of little ligaments that attach those two big bone parts together. And then on top of that, you have muscle, you have tendons that attach your the muscle to the bone. But the ligaments are the thing that join bone to bone. So they provide this not happening like this. So when your knees cave into the middle, then that's placing extra stress on the joint itself. So most of the time, for instance, a knee is going to have a decent range of mobility because it's very hard to do normal life things if that doesn't happen. So for example, with that, a knee replacement might affect that, or an ACL rehabilitation might affect in that you might not have the mobility in your knee, and it's very hard to walk, for example, when you can't fully extend your knee. However, that joint being a hinge joint, it's quite simple. It's quite simple to rehabilitate. It just takes a long time. When you're talking about a back is, building blocks put on top of each other. I explain this to people all the time. So you've got two blocks put on top of each other. In the middle of that block, you've got this, spongy sort of disc that provides a bit of shock absorbance. But the vertebral bodies also provide that shock absorbance themselves as well. And if a spine needs to be stacked, the vertebral bodies on top of the vertebral bodies. And if you start to bend this and twist it at the same time doing squatting action, then a lot of people over time will experience back pain. And that's what we see is when someone tries to squat, the spine will inappropriately move, which means it's not stabilized at a certain point, and especially the lumbar spine. If you think about the rib cage that attaches to a whole bunch of vertebral bodies. So that vertebral body, being the thoracic spine, is really stable and it's really well fixed in. You need some extension in that to be able to squat well. If you overflex the thoracic spine or you brace too hard for too long in a postural sort of hunch position like this, then sometimes what they'll do is they'll stop the extension. So it's very hard, for instance, if I'm here, if I can't externally rotate my arms to get them under a bar, then my automatic bend point is the old stand up straight principle, which is just lumbar extension. And so if you're in lumbar extension at the start of your squat pattern and you hold on to that lumbar extension, you're sort of pulling against, the joints in your spine, you're pushing on a point. You're not stacking the spine on top of each other. So there's some of the things that we look for when someone's squatting and say they might have some pain or had some pain before. We're trying to look at how do we load that person correctly. So that's why my saying is not every single person needs to do a loaded squat. It's just not sensible. If you're a power lifter and you need to do that in a competition, that's okay. If you're an athlete though, we can get away with not squatting. We can do other things to make you stronger, faster, fitter, more agile. We can do other things apart from just a barbell squat or any squat variation if we need to in a rehabilitation phase, but still have you playing sport, because it's not the be all and end all. If you're a functional everyday life person and you get told by someone you have to be able to squat to live your life normally, that's a load of BS. And I think a lot of my friends and mentors would agree with that, in that you don't have to be able to squat with a bar on your back or a dumbbell or anything like that to be able to live a normal life. You can do other things like learn how to hinge very well, learn how to deadlift, pick up the ground that way rather than in a squat pattern, pick it up in a deadlift pattern. So if you've got back pain and squatting, it's not the end of doing gym. It's not the end of anything. It's just a symptom that you need to fix. The back's one of those things. If you sensitize it and you keep sensitizing it, then it'll keep annoying you, and eventually you'll probably get hurt to a point where your spine sort of refuses to integrate with you, and it says, if you keep doing this to me, I'm going to give you way more pain. It's think of it as a common sense way. There's other anatomical ways to explain it, but if you're looking at this as a normal everyday person trying to understand why, if you sensitize your back, if you put it in a position it doesn't like, it will keep telling you no, and eventually it will tell you no in a very spectacular fashion, and it will annoy you to the point where you have to go and get someone to help you. If you get help early and understand how to move well, and understand how to brace yourself, understand how to stabilize your spine in a pattern, then a lot of the time we can avoid that nasty end point where you're coming to us in almost a need of, please help me move because everything is hurting. So when we're squatting, a couple of things that we look for, and you can self-assess this in a camera, it's quite easy, is if you put your hands here and you squat, the classic things that we see is someone trying to stand up straight. And I don't know if you can see that there, but my shirt hangs off my back here. So little things to look for from a layperson point of view is if my shirt's stuck to me like this through my back, my ribs are sticking out here, then I'm extending. So extension is this way, flexion is this way. I'm extending my lumbar spine to try and stand up straight. I want to think about my ribs connecting to my pelvis and holding that in a nice, even fashion. So standing up tall is different to standing up straight, like you don't want to bend backwards. So make sure that you can find that position. And that's why, going back to original, if you can't find that position and you can't find it yourself and you don't know how to find it yourself, it doesn't take someone like us very long to help you figure that out. Yeah, then when you're actually going through the squat, and I'm just showing you from hip down at the moment, or hip around. So here, when you go into a squat, so you've got to be able to hinge through your hip structure here. And so you can see there that my shirt hasn't done this, it hasn't pulled up, it hasn't bent like this, so my spine isn't bending forward. So classic squat pattern that we see all the time is someone will bend, and they'll bend their spine and they'll roll into almost like a frog. So a frog has like a different vertebral, or not a vertebral structure than a human. It can get away with doing that bent, and it releases its elastic energy to jump. It's quite an incredible creature, but we aren't necessarily built like that a lot of the time. So a lot of people get immediate back pain in a flexion moment there, where they're flexing through spine. What we aim to teach you is to be able to do this and to hold that position. So an easy way to look at teaching yourself that is put your hands here and then find your knees. Find your knees. It's called a short stop squat, and we're going to find our knees. We're going to stand back up again. What that does in general is it helps you find that neutral. So if you're a bend here, think about pushing back to sit down, push back to sit down, find your knees, stand back up again. And that's one of the ways that you can find that neutral spine. So, vertebral bodies stacked on top of each other in a positive way. And then we're going to find our knees with our hands. And if you can start to get there without any pain, and you had pain before, then really what you are is winning the battle against like that poor movement that you displayed before. And now you're holding a better structure with your spine, and you can find that nice position for you. Now, that's not going to fix everybody. It's not going to be an immediate fix. If your spine's super sensitized, sometimes nothing like that will fix it. Sometimes it is seeing one of the physios and getting them to do some work on you, and then going and doing some exercise afterwards. to fix the long-term part. But I guess what we work on from a exercise and an exercise science point of view is we try and get you to understand how your body is meant to move and take a step with you to get there. So it mightn't be getting there right away, but it might be understanding basic pathways. But that's a really simple test that you can do at home if you do get back pain and squatting. And if that does correct things on an immediate level, then automatically you know that you're going probably into a flexion moment in squatting, and all of a sudden you've found neutral and you can actually go through that squat. And we see that work quite a lot with someone that's got back pain, and you find that neutral point and all of a sudden their back pain doesn't exist in that squat pattern anymore. And the other joint that's really important is your ankle mobility. So there's two arguments. One, do you squat knees over toes? One, do you squat vertical shin? Two very different schools of thought, and it's all about individual horses for courses. So it's some people can squat with a really vertical shin angle, which is a bit hard to see in this camera here, but here, so a very vertical shin angle here. So my shins never really go forward like this, so I'm not knees over toes. And some people can just fall straight into a squat position, knees over toes, and they can be all the way down, which we won't be able to see in this camera angle here, but you can go all the way down to the ground, keep a neutral spine, knees right over toes, and they never have a problem. It's really dependent on how long your femur, your thigh, how long your shin is, how mobile your ankle joints are, and how long your trunk is, and how they all interact with each other as to whether you should squat with a vertical shin, a complete another vertical shin, or knees over toes. And it also depends on personal preference. So that's really important to know, is there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's what works the absolute best for you. In a loading sense, most people would agree that you can probably squat more with a vertical shin angle than you can squat in a knees over toes angle. But then there are some people that prove that wrong on a daily basis. So there's a couple of things. I know this is a long video, but there's a couple of things that if you're really struggling with back pain, they're the reasons why you go and see someone that specializes in exercise therapy to help you move better. Because you always come back to stability and mobility and the interaction between those two. And if we can find for you, and we will find, the interaction point that works the best for you, then a lot of the time, like almost all of the time, if it's not a catastrophic injury, a lot of the time the pain that is caused by movement will be corrected or lessened or even eliminated by better controlled movement and better mobility. So that's our job, is to find that out for you. But just try that short stop squat, especially if you get flexion moment back pain, and think about how, if you're looking side on, how your shirt sort of sits. Like if it pulls tight to your back and you're sitting like this, then you've got to try, and over time we've got to try and adjust that a little bit more so that you find that neutral point. And then from there, squatting becomes a lot easier because you can control your trunk stability a lot better without working muscles that are meant to stabilize your spine. They're not trying to actually do the squat for you. All right, so if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to send us some information either on social media or by emailing us. And we'd love to help you if you look at this and resonates with you.